Tucker has to increasingly ask questions to explain away his brow furrow. Why is this happening? Ah! Why is this happening? Ah! I don't think anybody will be surprised if Tucker is confused.
Good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson.
Hi, Tucker. First of all, so I see you decide to go with towel dry, and you woke up from your nap and didn't get a chance to fluff the other side of your head. Did they just wake you up on your couch? I mean, I understand the makeup and hair people hate you. Why wouldn't they? But you're a little uneven here, man.
One of the weirdest features of modern life has got to be how we've all been trained to ignore the things that really matter. You might have...
Yes. Did you ever notice? I have a lot of coat hangers, but I usually don't put coats on them. Mostly it's shirts. Sometimes I find that if I put pants on them, it puts a crease in the center. So they have these special hangers that are for pants. But you don't call them pants hangers, you just call them hangers. I guess anything that isn't a coat hanger is just a hanger. Why are coats so important?
Just to pick one among so many examples, why hundreds of thousands of your fellow Americans seem to be living in squalor on the sidewalk. How'd that happen? These are the so-called homeless. Drugs have destroyed their lives. So where'd those drugs come
from? I'm glad we're not painting with a broad brush. They're not. It has nothing to do with mentally ill people dumped out onto the street post the Reagan era because we don't have the institutional support to protect them. It's not that. Because that would be socialism, apparently, so we can't have that. Even though it's just taxpayers deciding there needs to be an institution to provide for folks. No, it's about as socialist as prisons are, technically.
Exactly. And why is no one asking? And speaking of chemicals...
speaking of chemicals, what the fuck are you talking about? It's time to notice the things... No, it's time to apparently breeze past the things that matter. Is this a segment where Tucker's like, these are the thoughts I have in traffic. And then as soon as the light changes, I don't think about it anymore.
In America seem very different from what they used to be. Anyone over 40 knows this. The changes are dramatic. You can't help but notice. Could those changes...
Oh, yeah. Yeah, those whole fucking cell phone thing. Why didn't we stop that in its tracks?
Have something to do with the unprecedented drop in testosterone levels that scientists have measured.
Look, what's wrong with your penis is your problem, Tucker. And some of us who at no point have done TRT and don't necessarily have plans to do it anytime soon don't really have a problem building muscle mass because we exercise and eat well. Tucker, if your penis doesn't work, keep it to yourself.
And by the way, if that's happening, why is it happening? And so on. There's so many questions like this. But we really...
Obesity. That's why testosterone's gone down in the United States. That's the statistical reason why it's happening. There's not some, giant pile of soy boys, none of that stuff. So, yeah, it affects your sperm count, it affects your testosterone levels. Being obese increases the amount of estrogen your body produces. That's why men get man boobs. It lowers their testosterone. It's not the other way around.
About any of them. Instead, we're told repeatedly to avert our gaze from the obvious and turn instead to CNN's latest fixation, whether it's a Chinese flu virus or George Floyd or some forgettable border dispute in eastern Ukraine.
Jesus Christ. What? Some Chinese flu virus is supposed... COVID's a distraction. As is the death of George Floyd, as is the Russian buildup on the border of Ukraine. This is just stuff to get your eye off the ball. And by ball, I mean balls. And by balls, I mean Tucker's empty ones.
These are the issues they tell us we must care about. But they're wrong.
They're wrong. They're wrong. COVID's not something we should even consider thinking about. Who cares about George Floyd? Why would we give a shit if Russia gets Ukraine and controls all the oil and gas in Europe and uses their gangster kleptocracy to destroy democracy?
These are not the most important issues. They're just news stories.
No.
The only remarkable thing about them is our willingness to believe they're more important than, say, Americans living outdoors on the sidewalk, or whether or not our own.
Well, no, we don't choose between the two. We have homeless initiatives, charities, cities are doing different things. Most of what you're pointing to is on the West Coast because that's where the homeless survive. And if you're saying drugs have destroyed their lives, then what would be the purpose then? How would you solve it, for one? And why would you be against, say, drug treatment for folks?
Children get married. There's something a little scary about watching this happen. It's like an entire population transfixed by issues that ultimately don't really matter. How's that going to work out? Well, over time, probably not very well.
I don't know. And no, it's going to be terrible. While you guys are focused on a pandemic and all that kind of stuff, and you're not really dealing with homelessness, even though it's been a key factor in mayoral and city races across the entire country, and there's all kinds of programs, and cities and states are handling it in different ways.
Reality always reasserts itself. Twitter can ban all the thought criminals it wants, but
Yeah, but Twitter can do that all at once, but Tucker's penis is still not going to work.
And Twitter is not in charge of the future. Nature is in charge of the future. If you
I didn't realize that. Okay, that's good. Since when did nature get in charge of the future? And by the way, I don't want to disagree with you entirely, but I kind of have to, because if nature was in charge of the future, it wouldn't let us build roofs to avoid the rain.
your country to continue, you have to answer nature's imperatives, which are the basics. Do you
Yeah, you got to answer nature's call. And you got to go, you got to go.
enough water? Do you have a reliable food supply? Can you defend yourself from invaders? What are you using for energy? How are you producing things and keeping warm? Those are the essential questions that any civilization.
Yeah, hence the infrastructure bill, the rescue package, Build Back Better, and the Biden's institution of stricter moves on the farm bill and improvements of bankruptcy protections for farmers. Dude, we're getting 5 new chip factories in the United States in the next 2 years. What? Who the fuck thinks we don't consider these things?
Must ask. Those and one other. How many people do you want living in your country? The size.
Oh, God. That's a good question. We have 340 million now. Obviously, there's a lot of rural areas with a lot of resources up north, Wyoming, the Dakotas. You could build some big cities up there and there'd be plenty of natural resources. You wouldn't even have to move or alter much. I'd say we could top out at around 500 million people and still do okay. Is that a good number?
Population matters very much. The size determines a nation's character. It often determines its fate. Yet we don't talk much.
We don't talk much about how many people we have here.
About the size of our population. We probably should. The United States is growing faster than most Americans understand. If you were born in 1969, as some of us were, you arrived in a country with a little over 200 million people in it. There are now 334 million people.
Dear God. I'm starting to think beating all these infectious diseases and coming up with cancer treatments and largely solving the problem of infant mortality was a mistake. Thanks, Tucker. Before, we had natural means that would stop this kind of thing. You know, like starvation.
In it. That's an awful lot of new people in an awfully short time. How many people is that exactly? Well, it's nearly twice the population of the entire western United States. That's 13 states, including California. That is
yeah, but it's also including a bunch of states with no one in them.
Massive and incredibly rapid demographic growth. And it's accelerating. Immigration is now at the highest level ever recorded in American history. So is the number.
and it's still not topping out the number of people. Oh, good God.
Foreign-born already living here. Over just the last year, roughly 2 million people from the third world came across our borders illegally. All of them arrived with the blessing of the White
No, they didn't, and they got turned back. And a lot of them are repeat offenders. We know this. We've covered this dozens of times. Not even close to true. 3 million people have not crossed the border and stayed in the United States, forever changing the demographic. We have not gone from 11 million undocumented people in this country to 14 million in a year. We haven't. It's just goofy.
House. It makes you wonder what sort of economy Joe Biden imagines we're going to have going forward.
I don't know. Let's see how Joe Biden's economy is doing right now. Let's see. What's the let's see. What kind of economy the Biden administration is hoping to what kind of, if the, obviously what the terribleness, this is 807,000 blowing past the 400,000. It's like, how many people, even with these folks quitting their jobs because one job will now sustain a household, God for fucking bid. What kind of economy does Joe Biden want? One with full employment?
Manufacturing is in steep decline. Automation is replacing many of the low-skilled jobs that still remain.
So manufacturing is in steep decline. And this is just this year? Is that what we're... Because, obviously, it wasn't in steep decline under Trump, of course. He was the savior of the right wing. This is Trump's hero. Tucker's hero. Let's see. U.S. manufacturing. Let's just see. Index. There's got to be something about this. What kind of economy does Joe Biden want? This is just, look at all these robots. U.S. manufacturing activity slowed in December amid a cooling demand for goods, but supply constraints are starting to ease, and a measure of prices paid for inputs by factories fell by the most in a decade. The Institute for Supply Management survey on Tuesday also suggested some improvements in labor supply, with a gauge of factory employment rising to an 8-month high. Cratering is what it's doing.
What are these millions of new people going to be doing for work 20 years from now? They can't.
Yeah. Aren't we just... I thought we were only importing day laborers, but all these strawberry picking robots are going to replace them. So they're just all going to be on the dole, being lazy Americans, voting for Democrats for creating an automated robot supply chain.
All be Nancy Pelosi's housekeepers. They can't all bust tables at the French Laundry in Napa. And not all of
they could work under the table at Mar-a-Lago.
Will, thank God. In spite of the Democratic Party's best efforts to import a permanent serf class to serve its donors, some of these immigrants will rise higher than Nancy Pelosi expects they will. Some will fight their way to the top of our society with the usual combination of inborn talent and grit. And honestly, bless them for that. No one invited them here. We didn't want them to come, but we will be sincere.
But if they manage to be millionaires, obviously they're at the top of the bell curve, and we can put up with it, I suppose. Ew.
Glad when they succeed. And yet, a country is more than the success of a handful of people, inspiring as that always is to watch. Sheer numbers matter too. Even if every single person who snuck across our southern border this year goes on to win the Nobel Prize in Chemistry, it would still be worth worrying about the effects that mass immigration have on our total population numbers.
Well, and also it's very concerning that everyone, that 3 million people live to be 3 million years old, because they'd have to, all right.
So the question is, how many people is too many? In Washington, you will never hear that question. More bodies in a country mean more power for the people who run it. Big nations need big governments. Politicians always want more people to rule, so the incentive for unrestrained population growth is baked right into the system. That's bad.
Is it? Then what? Unrestrained population growth? Please dovetail this into Democrats are pro-abortion, though.
News for the rest of us. First and most obviously, big governments don't treat their citizens very well. Yes, that's a Reagan era.
Oh, yes, that's a Reagan era idea. And a big government is a relative term to a country that is the most important and biggest economy on earth. Big compared to fucking what? Maybe there's something to be said for the amount of government we have, considering, and all the state governments we have, considering California is the, 12th largest economy in the world or something. It varies. Jesus, so boring.
Talking point. It's also true. The larger a bureaucracy becomes, the more impersonal it gets. Past a certain size, organizations of any kind lose their regard for people.
Yeah, that's right. That's why we need to the American government to be smaller than the needs of the people. That's the only way they're going to take us seriously.
They get bigger, they get blunter, more soulless and cruel. The people in charge no longer care what you think.
Well, enough about the upper management at Fox.
They don't have to worry about how their policies will affect you or your family. And that's the inevitable product of population growth. If you had 5 children, you would bathe them all in love and attention. If you had 5,000 children, you wouldn't know their names.
Well, that's because you'd be exhausted from ejaculating. And if you're a woman, you'd be completely, you'd look like a balloon after a birthday party.
In case you're wondering why our leaders no longer seem especially interested in...
If you have 5,000 children. You do realize with this analogy, though, considering we have a representative government that's based on democracy and representation, that if you used house rules, sort of, you would get another parent for every 30 kids added on this. It would take a village, is what I'm saying.
Health or happiness or prosperity, that's the reason. They don't have to be interested. Our population's too big. Why should your opinion matter? You're one of many.
Well, because it's the nature of the country that they run for us. It's a representative democracy. It's not authoritarian. You do have individual freedoms that are staked. That's why we have a constitution. That's why you don't want somebody like Trump being installed by a very small group of people, because then that would make the vast majority of voters, the majority of which who voted for Joe Biden, for example, think their opinion didn't matter in a democracy.
Previous generations of Americans didn't live in a country like this, and they would be stunned.
That's true. But they also died of dysentery more often.
By the attitudes that are so common now, attitudes we take for granted. Arresting people for walking through the U.S. Capitol building? How is that a crime, 19th century America?
Well, they were trespassing, and they've been told to stop, and they walked past it anyways. You tell you what, Tucker, you want to find out? Go to the Capitol today and walk around the metal detector and refuse to go through it, because we are concerned that people might try to kill our representatives in our representative government because they want to usurp that control in a tyrannical form. The one-man tyrant crowd who think that it's not tyrannical when they decide to drive to D.C. in their fucking truck full of guns and take away our representation through taxation and insert themselves in between the voter and the outcome. That's tyranny. Walking through the fucking Capitol. Do you know how many people who walked through the Capitol on January 6th aren't in fucking jail and are out walking around?
Would wonder. For most of our history, Americans believed they owned the Capitol. They thought it was theirs.
Yeah, but you couldn't storm the fucking place. What are you talking about? Yeah, we all own it because we pay for it with our taxes. But that we don't get to fucking, this is mine. This is mine. Let me take it. What's that on your desk? I'm a taxpayer. This is mine. You don't own it like that, fucko. You don't own it like rich assholes own Fox.
Because they assumed this was their country. Political leaders told them that it was. After the
Well, oh, and now that we're not telling people it's their country, they're trying to tell the government that this is their country by stealing shit that the rest of the taxpayers paid for.
For a presidential election, Teddy Roosevelt greeted voters in person on the lawn of the White House. It was his home, he lived there, but it belonged to them.
Yeah, but then international travel, terrorism, lunatics, Timothy McVeigh, shit like that tends to make people a little tepid about the handshake crowd. That's why they organize events now. Let me give you an example. He would consider Trump a man of the people. Didn't ride around in a convertible in Dallas, did he?
Attitudes like that are long gone. They're the victim of population growth. The
I see. It's population growth. It's not dangerous asshole growth.
invented democratic government, but at its peak, Athens only had about 8,000 voters. So past a certain scale, democracy can't function very well.
What the fuck? That's why we have a House on the one hand. That's why we have mayors and city councils and all kinds of shit. That's why the federal government doesn't dictate streetlight timings. And at the same time, again, Fox is just back to shitting on the idea of democracy. Apparently, the problem is America has got to be a dictatorship at some point. Enough of asking the people what they want. This is bullshit. We're going to need a ruling class because it's just not going to fucking work.
The concept of the citizen becomes too abstract. You see it in the way our leaders talk. Politicians barely mention individuals anymore. Instead, they yammer on about voting blocks, which are now called communities. The immigrant community, the trans community, the Latino community, the black community. You hear,
but they never mention the white community, and that's the part that's upsetting Tucker. What? Jesus Christ.
Terms constantly, but they are nonsensical. They don't mean anything. For example, there are about 47 million black people in the United States. That's a community? No, it's not. By definition, 47 million people cannot be a community, no matter what.
Yeah, it's not possible. They do not have a shared experience, and statistical, polling data around that group of people never will come to the. Oh, they do actually. Yeah, we know they don't have a potluck every fucking Wednesday, all 47 million of them, fucko. And we also know they're not monolithic.
The people within it are. How could it be a community? They don't even know each other. What you're looking at is not a...
Yeah. What could they possibly have in common?
Community, but 47 million individuals, each created by God as unique.
Yeah, and meant to die alone, sharing no traits with anyone, especially if they look like them. If they, any more than they share with just random people who are also born alone and lacking community. What the fuck?
Each with opinions and interests and preference and goals that aren't quite the same as anybody else's. In other words, they're human beings. People who run big countries tend to forget that. When you're in charge of hundreds of millions of people, you cannot help but to dehumanize them. Not that our leaders...
Right, yeah. Not that they care.
...have ever had a problem with dehumanizing people. In fact, they're strongly for it. A year and a half...
Hold on. Wait a minute. Not that our leaders have ever had a problem dehumanizing people. They're strongly for it. So America is the country that dehumanizes people. That our leaders, not leaders in general of giant countries, not large, not Russia, not China, but the United States government, which constitutionally has a responsibility to protect the right of every citizen to, express themselves as much as they can with as much talent as they have, but not to, step too hard in the face of anybody else who's trying to do it as well. But this is Fox shits on America all the time, but this is Tucker uniquely saying that American leaders throughout history, it seems, they've never had a problem. Apparently, never. They've never had a problem dehumanizing the citizens, our leaders.
Some idiot kid from Harvard wrote a book demanding that the United States open its borders to an additional 700 million new immigrants from around the world. If we did that, he argued in the book, we'd have a population of 1 billion people, and that might raise our GDP. Wall Street would be thrilled. Also, of course, we'd be more diverse with more interesting restaurants. Want Sierra Leonean goat barbecue delivered to your pod at 3 a.m.? With 1 billion people living here, you could get that done.
Sierra Leonean goat? Good God, man.
Noted the kid's a moron. But in Washington, here's the interesting part, no one laughed at him.
Yeah.
Quite a few ostensibly smart people agreed with his thesis, including some prominent Republicans who turned out to be as dumb and reckless as he is. Apparently, none of them has ever spent time in a crowded country. Anyone who has knows how deranged it is to want 1 billion people here in the United States. Mass population growth makes life worse for pretty much.
First of all, who the fuck where's the Biden we need 1 billion people in this country plan that we're supposed to be worried about? Like, talk about a non-issue. Like, this is like a fever dream of anti-immigrant paranoia. No, America should not have 1 billion people. All right, Tucker, I guess.
Everybody. That's the main problem with crowded countries. They're hard to live in. They're loud
Are they?
And dirty and chaotic.
Yeah, and there's barely any Canadians.
No privacy. There is no open space. There are never enough resources to go around. So
yeah, you have to shit in a trough and learn a foreign language. It's terrible. He wakes up in a flop sweat worrying about this.
Culture tends to become hyper-competitive and clannish. Crowding is bad for people.
Oh, is that supposed to be one of the upsides for you?
It's anti-human. In a famous series of experiments in the late 1940s, a researcher called John Calhoun forced a group of Norway rats to live in highly overcrowded pens. And almost immediately, the rats changed. They became aggressive. Then they became psychotic. Ultimately, they died. People aren't so different from that.
Well, yes, if they're forced into a camp and they have no way to exit, were the Norway rats avail the possibility of creating a suburb?
We need room. That's why our ancestors came to America in the first place, because there was room here.
Yeah, they didn't leave the UK because it was fucking crowded.
Who understands this? Rich people understand this. Ask anyone who's been around the world and knows what the options are. Ask, if you left the United States, where would you move? And no one's going to tell you Lagos or Mexico City or even Singapore. If they're being honest, they'll tell you New Zealand or Alpine Switzerland. Those are low-density places. They don't have a lot of other people in them.
Well, I mean, if you're the kind of person who has, is a Swanson Air with their own fucking helicopter, maybe. What? If you ask my NIMBY best friend assholes who hate people and think of the rest of the humans they interact with as accidental trash, of course.
Billionaires buy huge boats. Same reason. The ocean isn't crowded.
Is that why? It's not a status symbol? That's where they go out to go on the boat to, thank God. Like, I can't walk out on the street of fucking, where are the Walton family in, the Walmart? It's super crowded where they are,
There's no one else there. Uncrowded is good. Yellowstone is beautiful because it's empty.
So you just fucking hate people, I guess. Ireland, baby, Ireland, yeah.
You don't have to be rich to understand this. It's all pretty obvious. Really, only in a moment like this one, when the people with the loudest megaphones speak exclusively in lies, would we need to be reminded of it. Bigger is not always better. In fact, most of the time...
Big soulless companies are making America ugly. You mean Apple? I mean, it's a $3 trillion, fucking hell. What is happening? What is it? Are we supposed to give a shit about this message? What is this?
Worse. Have you driven around your country recently? You may have noticed there are fewer and fewer beautiful things in America. You're not imagining.
What? What are you talking about? There are fewer and fewer beautiful things. Huh? By the way, this is from a guy who supports the party that wants to destroy national parks.
That it's real. Dollar stores are everywhere. The question.
Oh my God, the dollar store blight.
Why is this happening? Well, the people in charge have no taste. That's part.
Yeah, that's the problem. You go to see Mount Rushmore and there's this big dollar store blocking the fucking thing.
They acquire, but they can't discern. For some reason, we put private equity firms in charge of the nation's aesthetics. Accountants are doing our exterior design. That's a terrible idea, obviously. But it's not the core problem. The core problem is that bigness is inherently ugly. There's never been.
I agree. You should please tell me he's announcing his resignation to join OAN. Fox has gotten too big. News Corp, too giant. No one respects anyone. No, it's too big an organization. He's going to start a zine in his garage. It's the only way to humanize the news.
A beautiful skyscraper. Every single one of them is an atrocity. The fact that people still pretend otherwise tells you how conditioned we have become to disregard our own nature and our own natural longings.
What the fuck? Who's like, oh my God, these strip malls are just beautiful. No, but 7-Eleven, ever since they came in, I mean, just like, I could just stare in autumn. It's like a fucking sunset. Like, that's not why you're there, dum-dum.
Would you rather wake up in a $30 million condo on the top floor of an office tower? Or in a log cabin in a pine forest, wood stove glowing as the snow falls? That's rhetorical.
I'm actually going to go with the top floor condo because there's lots of other people, and I actually like and respect people. I enjoy interacting with them. I like lots of personality in my life, lots of interesting stories. I genuinely like humans. I don't view them as individual sheets of toilet paper blocking my view.
Obviously, no sane person would choose the condo. And yet we're told the condo is better. That's why it costs more, because the building is bigger.
That's not why. It's proximity to other people. It's having businesses, making enough money that one day you might retire to the cottage without living out there and having to fend off bears as a broke motherfucker. What? What is this? What is his argument here? Anything big sucks. America's gotten too big for its britches. It's got to come down. American cities, New York, Chicago, LA, Miami, Seattle, too big for their britches. They got to be burned to the ground. We all need to go back to living in the old West style because there's a new sheriff in town.
But how exactly is its scale an advantage? How is that appealing? Well, it's not. In fact,
yeah, it is. It's proximity to a lot of other people. So you have more relationship and business opportunities, more interaction with your fellow humans. You can start businesses and that kind of stuff way easier than running your own little, like, Ruby Ridge gun sawing, business out in the middle of fucking nowhere, dum-dum. I mean, this is how a trust fund baby thinks of the world. Why would I want to buy a condo? Why would I want to buy that?
Scale is the problem. Massive size is a threat, no matter what it is, always.
No, it isn't. What the fuck are you talking about? I mean, is he just straight up Thanosing at this point? Is this an argument for depopulating the earth? The United States needs about 30 million people. That's it. And then a bunch of robots and the occasional stranger that is forced because of your economic status to give you a hand job. I mean, what?
In our bones, we understand this. Anything huge is inherently terrifying to us. Children run.
I see. This is about penis size again. Your testosterone's a problem, and you're trying to. It's size is a problem. Size does matter, and that Smaller is better. That's the case I'm trying to make. I feel like we're all on the world's shittiest first date with Tucker Carlson. Micropenises are actually better. Hitler was a very powerful man. He had an innie. It's an upside.
From big things. If there's an upside to the last 2 years of the COVID insanity, and there may be, it's that many Americans seem to be remembering what they long for. Look where they're moving. Almost always it's to someplace smaller. LA to Austin, New York to Burlington, Seattle to Boise, Chicago to Naples. So it's the reverse of any other internal.
That's because there's a shit ton of people in all these big cities and fewer people there. So if 20 people move from a place that has 1,000 to a place that has 40, it's a bigger deal to the place they're moving to than the place they moved out of. The place they moved out of, people were like, did they leave? I didn't even know they were still here.
Migration we've ever seen. Americans are moving from the cities to the farms, or at least to the outer suburbs. They want more nature.
That's because they were working from home and they're realizing that they can do their jobs from home. A bunch of them are going to be wrong, and a bunch of new businesses especially are going to entail moving back closer together. Big cities will find new vigor in a lot of these things, but who gives a shit? What is this?
More human contact, more trees, more quiet.
More trees, more quiet. Quiet human contact. The kind of human contact you can call the police on and go, shut the fuck up! I'm trying to enjoy my farm! I didn't move out here to be around people!
And it's hard to believe they'll ever stop wanting these things. Because they're natural. They're the things we all want. At some point down...
Yes, cities are unnatural. Governments that band together more than 85 people is a good luck.
You can imagine young people setting out for the all but abandoned interior of our continent. Some of them may figure out that a depopulated Finnish settler town on the banks of Lake Superior...
Oh, man, that was a Freudian slip. Man, like, it... I mean, he's been dog whistling around it the entire time, but he just couldn't get through this segment without saying depopulation.
Maybe a better place to live and raise children than some sterile commuter parking lot 20 miles from a crumbling metroplex. They could figure that out. People aren't that stupid. They've just been misled.
I see. How stupid are they?
Economic forces are going to drive this, by the way, as they always do. For decades, our leaders have ignored the essentials, our food, our energy, our water, in favor of boutique.
Oh, they've ignored food, water. I see. So we don't have the EPA and the FDA, and also that's them ignoring it. Biden's infrastructure bill removing lead pipes, for example, that's ignoring it.
Sense that improves nobody's life. Pregnant flight suits, ladies and gentlemen. These people are ridiculous, and we're about to see.
Maybe it's your fixations that are ridiculous. Didn't you start this off with it? We're paying attention to all the wrong things. Biden just passed the law that was his idea, that he's been working at for a long time, that would cap wells that are leaking methane into the air and remove all the lead pipes in cities around the country and replace them with safer piping. You know how ginormous that is? Do you know the impact of lead on people's developmental capability when they're young? You know the violent impulses that people have when they've been lead poisoned through the course of their lives, the statistically higher number of violent crimes and sexual assaults that they will commit, drug use and all that kind of stuff, and fixing that, how that extrapolates for fucking ever when you remove that. The number of violent crimes that go down when you do that. And instead of fixating that, not even bringing it up in this segment, fixating on pregnant flight suits and saying they're ridiculous.
Results of their long-standing negligence. Energy prices, for example, probably aren't going down. How high are they going to go? Nobody knows. But at some point...
Well, they're apparently going to go down in November, and even after peaking in the summer again, after going down in the spring. They do this a lot.
Become very obvious that it makes more sense to buy your staples maybe nearby. More sense than it does to order them online from a warehouse across the continent.
So you're going to go live in a log cabin so you can drive 60 miles into town, the town that still has a Staples. What?
So the Rising cost of transportation is likely to be permanent. The world we live in other words, cannot last. And that's not...
Hey, asshole, first of all, if you have an electric car and you don't travel all that much and some solar panels, you never pay for fuel. Especially as, you know, technology, again, deflationary, these batteries are going to get better and better and better and better. Fucking hell.
Necessarily
it's almost over. It has
There's nothing wrong with setting down roots somewhere that's smaller. It's not a bad thing to know the man at the grocery store or the lady.
Jesus Christ. I feel like this is a little much for a Tinder date, Tucker. I feel like you're trying to talk someone into going to your log cabin so you can chloroform them. Fucking hell.
It's pretty nice, actually. It might even be an improvement over Midtown Manhattan, believe it or not. Healthy societies are not at all like the one we are living in now. They're not impersonal. They don't exist to maintain empires. They exist to serve the human beings who live within them. They elevate their citizens. They don't degrade them. Now, obviously, that's the...
What the fuck? What do you mean? Why is society degrading you? Because a lot of people live together, and some people need to buy a bottle of water 4 times a day, and there's 7 million people on the island of Manhattan or some shit at any given time, considering the people who live there and the people who work there and commute into the city. And so they have bodegas and stores all over the place so those people can run in and get that thing, or some resources. And there's tiers of wealth even amongst this incredibly rich city where some people can't afford to both live in that town and be close to the job that they want because they're trying to grow an industry or build some sort of career or life. And New York is a great place to do that while still affording to shop at Whole Foods. Like, what? This isn't dehumanizing or degrading. This is the reality of limited resources and people making cost analyses in their life. What will I put up with to get where I want to go? I can stay here and it'll struggle and it'll be hard and not everything's great and it's a little dirty and it's noisy and there's a lot of other stuff. But I'll put up with it for a while because I have a chance to grow into something bigger. Or I could go live like the fucking Unabomber and never get anywhere and get mad at the entire world and mail in fucking bombs to people. What the fuck?
Opposite of the system we currently have. The good news is the system we currently have cannot last. It's too perverse. It's too disconnected.
What? Yeah, this is okay. He's just calling for the death of democracy. Isn't this supposed to be on his Fox Nation show?
Natural world. So it will end. And as it does end, as we think about how we want to live going forward, it's worth remembering that other people in the end are all that matters. Your relationships are the sum of...
The only thing that matters is other people. That's why you want to stay as far away from other people as you can. The worst places are the places with lots of other people. This, by the way, what we have been watching means nothing. There's about 30 seconds left of this. This is... what a fucking rando waste of time.
Life. Those relationships start with your family. They move outward in concentric circles. They include your friends, your neighbors, and the people you work beside.
Okay.
This is your...
Okay. Well, hold on. I'm going to write this down. Hold on a second. Friends, neighbors, and people I work beside. In my cabin in the woods or in the business that I no longer want to go to because I'd have to commute from a fucking cabin in the middle of nowhere to a metropolis.
Community. The human beings you know personally, the ones you love, the ones you take responsibility for. And that can never be a very big group. Hey, Sean Hannity here.
What did Tucker Carlson just fire his fucking family on the air? Listen to the paranoid delusion of this fucko.